and welcome to We Women Want. This is our weekly show where we discuss issues related to women. It can be anything: work-life balance, motherhood, it can be relationships, it can be domestic violence, it can be health issues from IVF to cancer to, everything is on the table really. And this is the show where we applaud the winners, but we also, it's become a sort of a support group for women who have issues, who want to understand. We try and find solutions and try and see what we can do about the problems faced by women all over. It's also watched by men, I must tell you. In fact, today's topic is especially of interest because we are discussing bringing up boys. Everyone says you must educate your girls, they have to, tell them about society, tell them how their behavior can be understood, misunderstood. But what about those who are misunderstanding us? What about the boys? In a way, what happens to women is, the boys are very much a part of it. I think that in terms of gender equity, the boys need to be educated as much as the girls. That is a conversation that is fast gaining ground today, fortunately. But today I have with me on the show, I have Sara Abdullah Pilot. She's a co-founder and chairperson of Sequin, which is a Center for Equity and Inclusion. It's a Delhi-based NGO that works on gender equity. In fact, they had a very interesting campaign with the Delhi Daredevils, Respect Women, Respect Delhi. And more recently, they had a Mardon Wali Baat. They started a digital campaign working with male influencers and also narrating stories of where men have also worked in a positive narrative in terms of helping women. I also have with me Namita Bhandare. She's a columnist. She's a writes on gender and social issues. She's also a very gender activist at times, and she's writes a column for the Hindustan Times, Mind the Gap. Leher Kala, she's a columnist with the Indian Express and also the founder of Hatke Films, another one who raises issues pertaining to gender and social issues. Sarah, I'll begin with you first a bit about, tell us a bit about Sequin, also what you do and, related to today's topic. Your recent campaign, Mardon Wali Baat, has gained a lot of traction. In Namita's column also I read about it.
Yes, it's been a very exciting campaign, but Sequin, we just celebrated our 16th anniversary, and we actually from the beginning had this understanding and this realization that while we are talking about gender equity, while we're talking about violence against women, the conversation is completely incomplete if we do not take men and boys on board and if they are not part of that conversation. So initially when we started our work in 2009, and if we would go to funders and we would say that we want to do a project with men and boys, they would say, but why? You want to do gender equality and gender equity, why are you going to do anything with men and boys? Because the understanding then, as you said, was talk to the girls. Acha, take a pepper spray, do self-defense classes. Men and boys, they were not part of the conversation. Now, of course, it's everybody, a lot of people understand that, of course, you have to have them on the table. You have to understand also what are their issues. It's not just about the girls. The boys are as much a victim of this patriarchy as the girls are. So it's about going deeper and really unpacking this issue. Social media, of course, is one part of it, but really going deep and seeing what is patriarchy and what do we do about that.
Namita, I also been reading a lot on your columns also. So, the whole issue where you're saying also go talk to the men, taking off also from what Sarah has said.
Priya, it's very logical. The famous global statistic is 1 in 3 women will be subjected to domestic violence, either physical, emotional, sexual, financial, but will be subject to it very often from an intimate partner. Now, if 1 in 3 women are being subjected to violence, then 1 in 3 men are committing that violence. So if you're going to talk to just one side and not talk to the other, you're going to have an incomplete campaign. If you're serious about ending violence and not even, of course, the larger goal is equality. The larger goal is dismantling patriarchal structures, and the larger goal is an equal society, which right now no country in the world has. But you are not going to achieve that without taking the men along, without taking the boys along. And so that's why I feel, part of me is a little frustrated because I feel women and girls are always fighting for space. Whether it is in parliament, whether it's in the playground.
Or the classroom.
Yeah. Or in the classroom. Actually, classroom is one of the great successes, at least of India, where girls are now at par with boys. at least for primary and secondary, and even to a larger extent, to some extent, in higher education. So that's a great success story.
In fact, I remember reading Doon School wants to go co-ed, I think, because they think it increase the marks average.
Yeah, all the Doon School alumni is going crazy
Yes.
with that thought. But so on one hand, we are fighting for space. And then you're suddenly saying, in this kind of constrained environment, you're saying, well, we need to talk to boys. But so at one point level, I am frustrated by it, but at another level, I recognize that you have to make that space, even for the boys, even for those who occupy the space. Because unless you begin to change the narrative, you can bring in all the laws you want, but nothing will change on the ground if society doesn't change.
Which is why, Leher, I remember reading one of your columns, let's talk to our sons. You know, you have a son and a daughter.
I have a son and a daughter.
So there are conversations which earlier we used to reserve only for the girls, but you know, tell us a bit more about what you wrote. And
I don't know, I find myself more sympathetic to boys these days, you know. And just today when before coming here, I was reading the papers, and I think all of us have heard about all these suicides in Kota when these kids go to study for IIT. If you see the statistics, 95% of those suicides are by boys, you know. So obviously boys in this country and around the world are in trouble. You know, they're misunderstood, they're not heard enough. And that begins in the home, you know. Now if you see, you know, they did this experiment in Scandinavian countries where they found that teachers, even in play schools, spend more time comforting a girl when she falls than a boy. You know, so the expectation is men are supposed to be tough and masculine and suck it up, you know. And the fact is that they're just as vulnerable as little girls and they don't get heard. And this then carries on and carries on. So I think all of this, you know, until it changes in the home, I don't know how we're going to see this forward. And I think the bigger problem is that if you look at statistics across the world, especially in India, I feel that the women have really outpaced the men. And this goes through later in life also, you know, when it comes to relationships, whether you look at divorce statistics, the boys are still, you know, sort of floundering and trying to keep up, you know. So there was this expectation that they were ahead and the women would be at home and subservient. Now everything is falling apart because the men have not been able to keep up. And this is all to do with parenting, in my opinion.
so, and also now women are not sitting at home, they're there competing with the guys. So, you know, is there a case to be made here that the boys are also misunderstood? You know, can we tell them it's okay to cry, it's okay to show your emotions?
That's true, and I think there are, of course, a lot of stereotypes. So when we talk about masculinity, this is why our projects or our conversations, when we say about mardon wali baat, and we say that the boys are also, as Leher said, the boys are also struggling. There's this idea that you should be powerful, you should be very strong, but the boys don't feel powerful, they don't feel strong. And so there's this cognitive dissonance where they're not sure how do they go out into the world where they're being told that you can, you know, you should be aggressive, but they're not feeling strong, they're not feeling powerful, they're very confused about what's going on, and so then that leads to anger. Huge anger. There's fear, there's anger, and so when you see these very awful rapes and gang rapes, they mutilate these women. You know, it's like they're trying to exterminate them. This is something we have to really look into the psychology of this. Where is this coming from? This power, this kind of aggression. It's not good for the boys. I also have 2 boys. And I think it's very harmful for those boys or men. If you've got this kind of anger inside you, they're not happy. So we're not just saying that the girls should be happy and women should be happy. We're also saying that that kind of peace of mind is absent in our society. It's absent among boys and men, and what are we going to do about that? For their sake as well, for our society to flourish, we need to look at what's troubling them.
And also, I don't know what's the right word for it. Is it patriarchy? Is it, you know, the old systems where there's honor killing, where maa behan is a gali, where, you know, men are shown ke mardangi means keep the woman under your thumb. If you are being nice to them or sensitive, that means, or letting them be equal also is a letting them kind of a situation.
Right. So at Sarah's conference, the Sequin conference on Mardon Wali Baat, I met this very interesting man from Gorakhpur. And he has a small NGO called Gali Bandh Yojana. So where he's saying, it's such a lovely concept. He's saying all Hindi galis have to do with ma and behan.
Right.
And he's saying that's where the problem begins. So his entire NGO is involved with speaking to boys in Gorakhpur schools saying Gali Bandh Yojana. You know, Gali Bandh karo, because you stop, the language is important. So I'm just trying to say that there is, I think, an increasing recognition that men are also victims of patriarchy. Let's not say that only girls are victims. I mean, I do feel that girls, I mean, I don't share Leher's optimism of girls surging ahead. They are surging ahead in a small group. You know, but we live in a bubble. You know, when you look at, and Sarah will know better about how girls are still held back.
Yeah.
You know, where even freedom, they do not even have the freedom to choose to marry. You know, and forget about interfaith, intercaste marriage leads to riots. You know, a Dalit girl does not have the freedom to fall in love with a non-Dalit. You know,
It works the same for the boys, right?
and for the boys. The boys also suffer. But I'm just saying, so I don't see the girls surging ahead, you know, this kind of stereotype of girl. So, but having said that, we have to recognize that the boys are also victims of patriarchy. As you said, in honor killings, the boys are also killed. It's not as if only the girls are being killed.
Yeah.
So the freedom to something so basic, the freedom to love, is a radical act in India because you're exercising choice.
And again, choice, Leher, in the clothes you wear. Do you ever have a conversation with your daughter, for instance, into, you know, because you have
many painful
judges
conversations.
saying, many painful conversations.
Many painful
Are there some
conversations.
do's and don'ts which are there for like she can stay?
No, she's not allowed to wear a bikini in Delhi, and she's not allowed to wear shorts to the mall. So this leads to a lot of arguments. And she says, why can I not? I'm like, this is not appropriate for Delhi. You're meeting other kids, and if you're in your house, you can wear whatever you like, but I'm sorry, you can't. And it leads to a lot of, you know, it takes kids from our kind of backgrounds time to understand the reality of India. It's unfortunate. They may understand it intellectually, but they don't understand how parents view it, you know. Like, I feel, my son says this all the time, that the girls who are his friends are not allowed to take Ubers. The parents don't allow them to take Ubers at night. The parents are always calling when they go to parties. Parents are staying up, then the daughters are saying, no, you know, our parents are up, we have to go back on time. So, you know, the rules are different for boys and girls, and unfortunately, you have to live based on that, you know. They say that, you know, what is the need? The girls' parents are saying, if you live in Gurgaon, what is the need to go to a party in Delhi? You know, so it's tough being a girl from any background in India. Whether you're in Delhi, Bombay, Gorakhpur, the degrees are different, but it's not easy. And these kids take time to sort of navigate this space, you know. And you can say whatever you like to them about safety. It's a fine balancing act, you know.
Can I just add to something? As a mother of two daughters
That's
who are mercifully grown up.
You have a gender balance panel. She's a mother of two sons. You have a daughter and a son. And
Correct. Good thinking, Priya. So here's the thing. You know, my daughters used to always fight with me and say that, you know, you're writing about feminism and women should have a choice. But so why can't we go out? Why can't we stay late? Why can't we wear what we want?
Yeah.
I said, because you please look at page 3 of any newspaper.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, I maybe I'm feminist, but I'm also a mother.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to be subject to an experience that will traumatize you for life.
Yeah. And be unsafe.
And as they grew older, I think they began to see my point. Sometimes you just give in.
Yeah.
I remember we were going to Gateway of India and Bombay, and they were both wearing these little shorts, and they came out bouncing. I said, is this what you're going to wear? They said, yeah, what's there? Come on, don't be so old-fashioned. And they went, and within 5 minutes, they ran from there. Because it wasn't that people were it was unusual. If I go to a village in Haryana, I dress a certain way.
Correct.
I will not be wearing jeans and a short little top or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's also social reality, which of course has to be challenged and which of course has to be changed. But till then, we are mothers and we have these concerns,
No, so, you know, apart from, you know, there are also, it's not just always physical abuse, there's also gaslighting, there's also, you know, it works both ways. But there is a way of putting a person down, a woman down where, you know, just by the look or the male gaze, you know, there are other things that we have to tell our daughters and sons about.
Definitely. I mean, and I think when you say it works both ways, it does. But I do want to say that we should be very careful that we're not, there are cases, yes. It's not that, for example, men are not on the receiving end of laws, but that doesn't mean that the law is flawed because somebody misuses it. It's not that no woman has ever misused a law, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like you have an anti-terrorism law. Just because maybe somebody is misusing it somewhere doesn't mean that you remove that law. So that's something I do want to say very strongly, that over the generations, women have been the victim of this disease of gender-based violence. It's not that no man is, but let's look at the numbers and let's look at the vast majority that it is the women that are the victims of this. And secondly, we don't want to get into some kind of protectionist, that, oh, now the men will say, we have to protect our girls and we have to protect our women. We're not saying that. What we want is that the women should have the choice. They should feel safe. They should have the choice to go to school. They should have the choice to not get married when they're 15 or 16. They should have the choice to be able to pursue higher education and to have a career or do whatever it is, to be at home or to go out or go to the park and just loiter. Women and girls are not allowed to do that. It's okay if they're going to work, then you can be going through a marketplace, you can be going through a park. But in a park, you can see guys and boys just hanging out. That's not really socially acceptable for a woman or a group of girls just to be there in a public space. Again, because maybe their parents don't feel that they're safe. It's a perception as well, right? I mean, if I feel that my daughter is not safe, then I will do all these things. It's not even about is she. It's about, we did this survey in Delhi and I think 97% of women said they didn't feel safe. So whether you have been the victim of, like you said, abuse, or have you been the victim of harassment, honestly, I don't know anyone. I don't know any woman across the world who has not faced some kind of abuse or harassment at home or at work or in public.
Or in
I
the
don't
U
know
special
anyone.
or in the bus.
Yes,
absolutely.
Actually,
And
that's
all of us
absolutely
have.
true.
Yeah. All of us have.
All of us have.
All of us have.
Yeah. I'm going to take a quick break and come back and continue this conversation, so stay with us. Hello and welcome back to We Women Want. Today we're taking a look at a very interesting topic, bringing up boys. What do we tell our boys? What do we tell our sons? And we of course know, Namita, what girls face, but there is also a danger, she used the nice word of perception, how they are perceived. So labels, that's another thing, if you, it's very quick, it's a very old conversation, but it still exists, if women are easier being labeled as fast, women are judged on their clothes, the color of their lipstick, also the, 100 things we're judged at.
But men are also judged on the basis of masculinity. So, the cliche, boys don't cry, boys don't show emotion, boys are supposed to be tough, they're supposed to protect.
And
right?
for boys, saying like a girl is a gali.
Yes,
is a derogatory term.
it's actually, so, there is all of that. And I think, when Sarah was talking about gender violence and how women are subjected to it, what happens to the boy who's watching his mother being beaten by his father? He's a victim too. He may not be actually beaten by the father, or maybe he gets an occasional slap or two, but a boy who's growing up watching his mother being beaten or being abused, say if she's not being physically beaten, but just being treated badly, spoken to disrespectfully, what is he going through? He's watching his mother being subjected to it. And the tragedy is that this then becomes an intergenerational trauma, which he learns from his father.
He thinks it's
Boys
okay.
learn how to love from their fathers, right? And then he picks up that from his father, that this is okay to talk to his wife like that.
Yeah, which is why, Leher, we were just earlier, Namita and had a conversation about the series Adolescence, where there are a lot of other influences at work also, whether it's, all these digital world, the kind of language, the jingoism.
Well, in the third episode of Adolescence, that boy makes a very profound statement to his therapist. He says that 80% of the women go for the top 20% of the men. Okay? So where does that leave the other 80% of men? Because let's face it, at this age between 10 and 20, women, men, the interactions between adolescents, it's very motivating, right? Because your hormones are raging, you're growing up, you're discovering the other sex. So how do we address the problem of what's happening to those 80% of men who are not getting attention from women? So a lot of what Andrew Tate says, though he's, he's considered like horrific,
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense from it raises a very pertinent question, And I think, again, this begins from home. We have to just completely dismantle this thing that, boys and girls are equal in every way, and they have to, ambition-wise, and how do we get them to be equal socially? And I think the biggest mistake, what happens in Indian homes especially in North India, is that even now, even in the most emancipated of homes, you find that boys are raised to be made to feel special.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the minute the boy leaves the parental home, he makes this very startling discovery that he's not special at all. So then he's like, what happened? I was special. Dadi told me I was special. Mummy told me I was special. And then, then he has to cope with that he's not special. He's competing with everyone. So this is something that parents have to look at, And I also feel that, boys are not encouraged to communicate that much. And what happens is, I think the way to communicate with a boy is action orientation, It's like with girls, you can, sit on a bed and talk to them. But boys, it's only when you're like playing something with them and you're not talking about what you want to talk about that they end up talking to you. You have to skirt the topic to get them to say something that they actually are feeling. At least that's what I've discovered.
I think you hit a chord over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's important, and I think boys need to feel that they're valued, what they have to say is valued, and those conversations, I think when you look at the world today, it's such a mess. If you look at the environment, if you look at this consumerism, even wars that are breaking out all over, isn't it this very aggressive, macho? I'm not saying that all women are perfect. No one is saying that women don't get angry. No one is saying that women are not violent or anything like that. But this very macho, masculine kind of culture that is across the world is causing huge problems. What would it look like if we had children who were in a home, like Leher was talking about, that is nurturing for both the boys and girls, where there's conversation to be had, where boys are able to speak, where they're able to communicate. If we talk about things like soft skills, which women are technically better at, or emotional quotient, if all those things even in boys are nurtured, and if they're given that respect to be able to, talk, to feel, to express, to be creative, which at the moment is something that, oh no, boys, no, you're not supposed to be like that. So we're not talking about tokenism, we're not talking about these metrosexuals. Just because you go out in a pink shirt doesn't mean,
you took away my next question.
that you are really treating your wives or your sisters or your daughters well. It's an understanding that is so much deeper than that. But wouldn't society be so much better if we raised our boys to be good human beings? It's not even about being like a boy like this or a girl like that. Isn't it about those kind of values that everyone should have?
Values, and also, I know you also are good with the laws, is, a legal system, for instance, how to say no, marital rape. These are also conversations.
Of course, marital rape, but these are big conversations for the courts to decide.
Okay.
Marriage equality, LGBTQ rights. I mean, I think what we're talking about here is really talking to boys at home.
Okay.
How are you going to talk in your, and Priya just I recalled something, when Leher was talking, it's not just adolescents. This is, I remember attending a conference about 10 years ago, and this was in the UK, and this mother, a British mother, very British kind of mother, she's saying, the 16-year-old boy, he's in the room next door, he's on the computer, she thinks he's watching something, maybe he's watching porn, maybe he's watching something, maybe he's doing his homework. She's not too fussed about it, but he's actually in touch with the ISIS. Oh. And then one day so it's, I'm just trying to say where are the dangers coming from? It's not just Andrew Tate. And by the way, I have never heard anybody use Andrew Tate and sense.
No,
the same sentence.
you've got to hear him. Yeah.
I don't want to hear him.
No, understand his point of view. And the fact
I don't want to know his point of view.
But the fact that so many people and so many men are relating to him, makes him
But I'm
important,
just saying the dangers, the point I'm trying to make, the dangers online, this is 10 years ago, before anybody had heard of Andrew Tate and masculinity. This is ISIS reaching right into your bedroom, and the next thing she knows, this boy has run away. He's gone.
No,
and then he gets a call 6 months later and he says, I'm in Syria. And then he calls her once or twice after that. The last call is to say, well, I'm getting married. And, she's trying to keep it light. And she's saying, I hope you see her face before you get married. And that is the last communication from her son. She never hears from him again.
Yeah, this digital danger, there is a lot, because it also, whatever the parents are teaching at home, is being countered by a more attractive world, which is, whether it's
Yeah, but I think this is something every parent across the world struggles with, and nobody gets it right. At what point do you allow a 16-year-old some personal space? At what point do you monitor how much or what he's watching? Either you, sort of disconnect the internet at home and say that nobody has access to anything.
Which is also not possible, because
it's not
there's
possible,
homework and
there's Netflix, and we need it for ourselves.
Thank you. I like that.
It's a fine balancing act, and I do think social media has to. I feel somehow now, maybe because I'm off a lot of these things, that people are sort of losing interest. I get that feeling. I could be completely wrong, but children, I find that in the school that my daughter goes to, they warn them about the dangers of this, and the fact that it shows up on your record. And if there's one thing we can thank Trump for, it's made all these children very vigilant about what they post, because the schools are telling them that, listen, you post the wrong thing and Trump won't let you into America. So this is, in the last couple of months, they all sort of taken a back step. They don't want to be saying anything inappropriate about anything. So maybe this is one positive impact of Trump.
Trump and Tate. Who's next on your list?
Positive and Trump, what is happening?
But on that note, I think it's been a very interesting conversation, a lot of takeaways, and we began by saying bringing up sons, but I think sons and daughters, the gender equity balance, it has two-edged. It works on both sides also. There are boys, there is pressure on the boys, you have to be the bread earner, hence the suicides in quota probably. Girls can decide whether they want to earn or not. So there are issues, but end of the day, it is society, it is interaction, and it is having a civilized conversation with each other. That's what we're hoping to promote by conversations like this. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.